Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships for our video today, which is highlighting the new Tier 9 Pan-American battleship, the Los Andes. And this ship has been rather interesting, to say the least. I just picked it up as soon as it came out of early access or just this week, I guess. The week's not over yet, technically, till we get to Monday. But I just picked it up. And I have been figuring this ship out. And to be honest, so I played it in both random battles and I played it in operations. And I was a bit frustrated by this ship when I first started playing it because I knew it wasn't the ship. It was just me and trying to figure out how am I supposed to brawl in this brawling battleship. You know, she's a mid-range to close range battleship, mid-range 12-15 kilometers, and then 12 and under, basically brawling, right? Because that's now we get our secondaries going. We have a 12-kilometer secondary battery range here on the Los Andes. And I was just really frustrated because I felt like I was just dying really quick. And operations taught me something in particular because of the armor thickness on this ship. So it's basically outside of the stern and bow, the ship's mid structure, like the armor belt and the deck, is all 51 millimeter. And you have German, which high explosive that gets quarter penetration, and then also the Japanese, like heavy cruisers and that, also get some pretty hefty penetration. I don't know if it's also the same quarter penetration values or whatever. So, and then you also talk about SAP from like a Brindisi, a Venezia, which will also easily pin, and of course a lot of the high explosive from enemy battleships. And you just take massive chunks of like 6K, 8K, 10K damage, and basically feeling that your survivability is really lacking when generally speaking, most of your high tier brawling battleships actually have like significant belt armor. I mean, even the Prinz Ruprecht at tier 9, I believe, has, and I know Schlieffen certainly does, has much thicker armor running along the armor belt. So even if you angle out, the high explosive damage you might take will really punish you. So I kind of want to, this video, it's highlighting the ship, but this is like when I finally decided I'm going to approach the ship a little differently. And then this battle, and then the battle after this one, and a battle after that one, I repeatedly scored #1 on team, whether it was win or loss. Like the battle I had after this one was insanely awesome. It was really close, really good. We had really great results, and I'm going to feature that one later, coming next week. But this video is me kind of explaining to you how I finally kind of began to understand the ship after like seeing the amount of damage to take in ops, because there's a lot of, you have higher tier ops have a lot of German, high tier German ships and cruisers and Japanese cruisers as well. And then also the frustration I was having in randoms where I would try to make certain plays and it just like, I can't live long enough in making this play. And that's really going to come down. There's probably 2, maybe 3 really good commander builds you could do here with the Los Andes. I would say I'm going to do an upgrade commander build video on this ship on Monday. But Los Andes is really one of those brawling battleships as I got caught on the island here and didn't get all the guns off, but we did get the first blood. But Los Andes is one of those battleships that I think really takes a high point commander to make the most out of. Like I'm running a 17.1 because that's the highest Pan-American commander that I have. But if I only had like, let's say a 10, 12 or 14 point commander, I know I'd be probably more frustrated with trying to get a feel and figuring out this ship if I didn't have the 17 point commander, because I'm just saving my last 4 points that could go 2 different ways. So with that being said, really suffering in randoms. I was testing things out. That's kind of how my approach was, and testing things out in operations as well. And then this battle and the battles that followed, I've had fantastically awesome battles with this ship. So now, what is the approach that I took in figuring out this ship, and then I'll kind of get into more about the ship's stats and consumables, this, that, and the other. Well, I kind of began to think. I was talking with divvying up with my Clan Commander Doom in this battle and talking about it with him about it, and I was like, I think I just really have to treat this ship and approaching it in the same way that I approached playing the Friedrich de Grosse. Friedrich de Grosse, the German battleships, I mean, Poison, I think, is much better than FDG. But it was kind of this mentality that until you thin out the enemy herd, you really can't be aggressive in pushing the first half of the battle, where it kind of it's more the last half of the battle, where you can begin to push and be aggressive, unless a certain play opens up and you get to utilize the islands and pushing in. Because in generally speaking, FDG's problem, it's a massive ship. It's very easy to hit the ship if you're shooting at it right. Los Andes is a little better because you've got the built-in propulsion. The ship's not as large and clumsy as FDG, right? As an example. So there's a little bit more we can get away here with Los Andes than what we can get away with the FDG. But I was like, okay, so basically the approach I need to take is probably a little more passive in the beginning of the battles, and then I can become more aggressive. But the other thing that the Schlieffen line taught me, like with Heinrich, Ruprecht, Schlieffen, is the power of when you're in a brawling battleship and you're kiting, you're letting the enemy team push into you as a brawling ship, always works much better than pushing in, because if you get to some point you just decide, oh, I got to turn out and disengage, you got to show a lot of broadside, right, because you're taking a lot of damage. When you're kiting, you're more or less setting the terms of the engagement. Do you want to slow down and keep them within secondary range, or do you want to accelerate, try to get away, and go dark, as an example? Okay, so that's the approach that I took with this ship. So I'm filling out both of these two enemy Los Andes, because you have a lot of them in randoms right now, right? And so they're kind of hopping island to island, and I'm getting a little frustrated because I'm like, come on, let's brawl, let's fight. I'm tired of kind of just sitting here waiting for you guys to make this push down, but I know that's going to be happening from C, as we now lost the D7 Provincian on the 10 line. Okay, so let's talk about the ship much more specifically now. So one of the things that this ship gets, and I'm trying to find the consumable, is the special abilities, which we've just activated right now. It's the modified secondary munitions, and what happens here is that you get when you activate it, you get a plus 20% to your secondary battery firing range. So that's why you see the 14.4 on the mini map now. You get a negative 50% on the secondary battery reload time, and you get a plus 25% on the secondary battery damage. And that's like really strong and impactful with how these secondary batteries work, because what you have here is you have 8x1 127mm guns, and then you have 8x2 234mm guns. Now these secondary guns don't fire as often as something like a Ruprecht or a Schlieffen, as an example, but when they do hit, they have a decent alpha. So like the 127s, yeah, they're 1800. But if you have something like Atlantico, with the 234mm guns, those hit for 3,850 each when they do land. And you get some decent fires as well. But it's just when the secondaries do hit, maybe feel frustrating to you if you're just looking for how many times did my secondary battery guns hit the target, right? But it's more about the alpha that these secondary batteries carry versus something like Ruprecht and like the American, like Ohio, things like that nature. So that's important to understand kind of how this brawling ship plays different. So the secondary battery skill, it's the way you activate it is essentially by landing enemy shells or your shells on an enemy target. So filling up that progress bar, that semicircle you see at the bottom beneath the reticle, and then the other is potential damage. So it's important, like here in this situation, I'm not spreading my fire out between both the enemy Los Andes because they have the same funny button that I have, right? It's important if I'm going to focus, shoot them, to only focus on shooting one at a time, so I don't have to deal with two of those funny buttons activated at the same time and being within that 14.4 kilometer secondary battery range scope. So here you see me slowing down because I don't want him to get outside as Doom takes out the CV. But I don't want to leave the secondary battery range, even though I'm showing a decent amount of broadside if the other enemy Los Andes decides to shoot at me. As you see me, I'm going to fire high explosive here, and I find the main battery guns, which I'm just going to talk about now, kind of trollish. So we landed 2 of those 10, whatever, right? I just want to make sure I'm thinking right in my head. No, 12. Sorry, 2 of the 12. These 381mm guns, sometimes I find like, wow, that dispersion really tight. Other times I'm like, feel like I just got trolled on my salvo there. So that can be kind of frustrating at times. But with these 381mm guns, let me go ahead and talk about the Sigma on them, as I have to pull that up on my list here. It is, where did you go? Oh, actually, I can look at it here. Derp. It's 1.7 Sigma, so that means you're not too accurate, so to speak. The higher, the better. I mean, there's some tier 9s, I think they have 1.4 kilometer Sigma, or sorry, 1.4 Sigma, not kilometer. And then the horizontal and vertical dispersion is 255 meters horizontally and 153 meters vertically. So you're not dealing with a super accurate battleship when we talk about the horizontal and vertical dispersion. Horizontally speaking, you would be placed at 25 of 45 tier 9 battleships. Vertical, you would be placed 28 of the 45 battleships. So they're not accurate guns. They're 381. Their AP and DPM are more questionable. You're 21 out of 45 placed. Your high explosive, you end up becoming, I think it's a little higher on the high explosive. Yeah, 14 out of 45 battleships in scoring. These shells don't hit really hard, particularly with the armor piercing, because the max damage they can put out is 10,700, unless you take, what is that, super heavy AP shells, which I wouldn't recommend. So they hit pretty low. The high explosive shells hit much better at 5,350 when you're comparing just in general, and have a 34% chance of starting a fire. So there are definitely times I find myself sometimes maybe wishing I had a gun feeder to switch between high explosive and armor piercing, but not always. I mean, you just tend to fire what you have, because in the reload time on these main battery guns is pulled up correctly, it should be 33 seconds. If you take main battery mod 3 in the 6th slot to get a negative 12% on the main battery reload time, you drop down to 29.04 seconds. But I actually take the auxiliary armaments mod 1, so I'm buffing the secondary battery reload time and buffing the damage by the AA, but mainly taking it for the secondaries here, because this is as much. I find you'll probably get a more decent chunk of your damage from the main battery, or sorry, from the secondary battery than armor piercing, or the main battery. And that just depends, right? If you get broadside targets, you know, you saw, I think, a 16k salvo we did on a broadside enemy Los Andes. Pretty good as we pick up our 3rd kill here. So that makes the ship more helpful, that you know, you don't have terrible main battery characteristics, but it's a ship that relies on the combination of the both to get the greatest amount of DPM from the ship. Now, in terms of other armaments, like with your find it on the list here, because I got a lot of things pulled up. Your ASW airstrike. You have a max range of 10 kilometer and 2 charges. You've got the funny button, and then you got your standard damage control party, which actually, one of the things I got really frustrated by, and again, this is kind of more of me talking about me figuring out the ship, is I initially ran the auxiliary armaments mod 1, which gave a plus 100% survivability on your AA, but the secondaries. And I was getting sick of being set on fire constantly, even after as soon as my damage control party went down. And you had a stock of 20-second action time on damage control party, where I swapped it out and I went with the damage control party mod 1, which gives you a plus 40% to the action time of the damage party consumable. So that bumps you up to 28 seconds. And then if you take something like the emergency repair expert, then you're going to jump up to 30.8 second action time on the DCP, which is much better. But in this one, I don't have emergency repair expert. It's a 17-point build. So it's just 28 seconds action time. And that's helped much more with the survivability for me personally, and not being set on fire as much from enemy ships. And then not only that, you have, of course, your repair party, but this one is fun because the cooldown time on it is 60 seconds. It's not the standard 80 seconds. It's not the what some of the American battleships get on the 40 seconds with like Georgia, Massachusetts, Ohio, right? And I think a couple others get it now. But it's 60 seconds. So if you're running like November, is it Foxtrot? It's a -5% on the consumable reload time. You can get down to 57 seconds, which honestly you need, I think, in engagements with the Los Andes as a whole. So the ship, when we talk about that 51mm armor, and this is kind of a funny moment here because I start like joking in the chat, comms with Doom, and just like calling upon the Mexican shells to bless me with favor, and we get the Kraken unleashed in the coordinated attack. But when you have the 51mm armor scheme and your hit points, which I haven't there's so much to talk about with this ship, right? Which is why we're going to do 2 videos on it. It's only 71,100 hit points, so you're kind of pulling low, but the built-in propulsion, I think your rudder shift is like among the best, or not the best, but it's the second best at tier 9. Is Scarlet Thunder taking the first slot on that. So that being said, I get General Offensive, Brother in Arms, Kraken Unleash, Coordinated Attack, First Blood, High Caliber with 168,000 damage, topping the team with just over 2,000 base experience. So just seeing, in that example of this battle of just like, okay, I need to kind of take it more chill in the first half of the battle, let them push into me. And this is an example of it like working like really, really well for us. You have 72,000 damage we received. We took almost 2.2 million potential damage. The next video I'm going to show you, I think we took 3.5 million potential damage in managing it as best as we could here with the ship. But you can see most damage we did was on that one Los Andes that contributed to like 93,000 damage, if I read that right. And this is what it looks like for premium account with just running the green boosters. We were running green boosters across the board for everything here in this battle. So the way to play this ship is, it's similar in certain regards to the FDG in my experience, my opinion. You just kind of have to let some enemy players die, but you want to be able to kind of utilize islands, which you saw we kind of pushed up. We utilized islands. We killed the one cruiser off the bat, and then we were waiting for the enemy team to begin to make their push down from up north. High explosive, heavy high explosive, like we were talking about German cruisers, Japanese cruisers, and then battle cruisers that are going to fire high explosive, and battleships that are going to fire high explosive, and torpedoes. But you get a decent rudder shift, which really helps you out in the built-in propulsion. But the high explosive is and SAP, sim armor piercing, is really like probably the biggest weaknesses of this ship. I didn't even get to talk about AA strength for the ship, which, if I'm looking at the list here, is ranked 28 among 45 tier 9 battleships. So it's not amazing AA, but the AA that you do get is 5.8 kilometer range. So I mean, planes, and then high explosive is going to be a weakness. So like you'll probably suffer a lot, with the Zals, Hindenburgs, Venezias, Conquerors, Devastation, Monarch. Anything that once decides to focus you down with high explosive is going to make this ship probably pretty suffering to play, which is why I think like that damage control party mod 1 to extend the action time of your DCP. You get that to 28 seconds, and then if you have your heal at 57-second cooldown time, then you're able to alternate between both of them like pretty well in keeping you alive and kind of sustaining your fight as a fighter, brawling, so to speak. But you don't want to put yourself in engagements where you're going to be overwhelmed and outnumbered by the enemy team, because you'll just get shredded down and you'll die like really, really fast. So that's kind of explaining me figuring the ship out. I'm sorry there wasn't really much of a commentary upon my decisions and what happened here in the battle. The battle I'm going to show you later or next week will be all like play-by-play analysis with the Los Andes. This is part of how I'm going to title the video. And that's when you would definitely probably want to know my thought process much more compared to this video. But this video is like me testing out, like, kind of keep at range, be mindful. Like, you're a fighter who doesn't have a ton of stamina. Maybe that's the best way to phrase it. You know, GK, Poison, there's other Ohio. They have a lot of stamina. They can really kind of take a lot of punishment over the fight. But with Los Andes, you want to fight a little bit, cool off, fight a little bit, cool off. You just don't have as much stamina. Maybe that's a better analogy to kind of think of this ship. But I'm interested. I'm going to pick up the Libertad later today because I've already finished grinding this ship. So with that being said, if you liked today's video, give a thumbs up. If you didn't, give a thumbs down. Subscribe if you want to see more. If you're subscribed, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you to my Patreon supporters. And until next time, take care.